Welcome back to D.C. We had an opportunity to welcome back a full house of members of the Democratic Caucus back to Washington, D.C. We were fortunate to have with us this morning in the Democratic Caucus the White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough. By the way, my name is Xavier Becerra. I'm the chairman of the Democratic Caucus, and I'm joined by our leadership team, and we're hoping that Mr. Clyburn will show up, but the leadership team is here. We had a great conversation with White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough. But we didn't just talk about what you all are probably here to hear about, and that's Syria. We talked about a number of things. Democrats continue to emphasize that this is going to be a failed Congress if we don't deal with jobs, if we don't deal with our agenda of Make It in America, if we don't move forward to help all Americans have health security through the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, then we've not done our work. And so we know that we have a lot to do, but we want to do what's right for our country and for our people, not just in terms of national security, but in terms of the economy and ensuring future prosperity for all Americans. Over the past 10 days, here in Congress, we have held 5 classified briefings. We have held 1 unclassified conference call with our Democratic colleagues who were scattered throughout the country in their districts doing work. And today we had a standing room only caucus meeting with the White House Chief of Staff. Tomorrow we will have another classified briefing for our members, and we are doing everything we can to make sure that they have the information they need to do what's right for America and join with the President. I want to also mention what our colleagues have been doing during this August district work period. Of the more than 100 Democrats who have reported back into us on their activities over August, we had over 2,700 events that were participated in, sponsored, hosted by our colleagues. Most of them, 764, had to do with jobs and our Make It in America agenda. Over 300 events took place to deal with the implementation of our health security law, the Affordable Care Act, and over 125 or so events took place on helping Congress move towards a common-sense, comprehensive reform of our broken immigration system. This caucus is focused on the priorities of the American people, creating jobs, growing the economy, and strengthening the middle class, and that's what we intend to do. On Syria, I will make only one point, then turn it over to the leader. I took a look at what happened in 2003 with the legislation that was put before the Congress, H.R. 1828, with regard to Syria and holding Syria accountable. There's a provision in that 2003 law that says that Syria's acquisition of weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles threatened the security of the Middle East and the national security interests of the United States. I mentioned that that's what that law says, that's in the books today, passed in 2003, because there are currently 173 members of Congress in this House of Representatives who were here in 2003 who voted on that Security Accountability Act. Of those 173 members of Congress who are here today who voted back in 2003, 166 of them voted for the Syria Accountability Act, which said that Syria's acquisition of weapons of mass destruction constituted a security to the national security interests of the United States of America. 78 Republicans, 88 Democrats who are here today voted in support of that Syria Accountability Act in 2003. And so when the President says that we must act because it is in our interest to protect our American citizens and to protect our national security, there are at least 166 current members of the House of Representatives who must have believed the same thing. What we do know is that the President is doing everything possible to make sure that what we do is what is right for our country when it comes to the issue of the use of chemical weapons. And so many of us are very anxious to hear tonight the President address the American people to give us, once again, a sense of why America will fulfill its destiny of being a leader for the world. And with that, let me yield now to the leader, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling attention to all of the activities, or some, that's just 100 members, many more to report yet, over the August recess district work period. It's really pretty exciting when you think of the issues that we did work on, whether it was creation of jobs, Mr. Hoyer's initiative, Make It in America, Congresswoman DeLauro's initiative, When Women Succeed, America Succeeds, an economic agenda for women, which drew women, hundreds and hundreds of women from all over the country to meetings about immigration. We're so proud of the activity surrounding a comprehensive immigration reform that went forth, even some meetings about background checks in terms of reducing gun violence, and all of those issues. Toward the end of the month of August, the issue of Syria loomed large and is center stage right now. But that doesn't mean that first day back yesterday we had a big meeting among House Democrats about how we can work in a bipartisan way to have comprehensive immigration reform. And this morning we already took up the issue in our Syrian Policy Committee meeting about the budget issues that loom ahead, the continuing resolution, how we go forward in a way that meets the needs and gets the job done for the American people. Mr. Chairman Becerra has taken us to the subject this morning with the President's Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough, on the subject of Syria. But he too started by talking about all of the economic issues and the jobs issues that are really important to the American people. Chairman Becerra talked about the Syria Accountability Act of 2003, led by our ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee now, Eliot Engel. He was the author of that legislation. I'm so proud that Senator Barbara Boxer, the senior member, both Democratic or Republican, most senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, spoke about that during the hearing and the markup of the authorization legislation last week in the United States Senate. That all takes us to a place as our president has made a decision to enforce the Syrian Accountability Act. For a long time now, stopping the use of weapons of mass destruction has been a pillar of the national security of the United States. The Syrian Accountability Act is clear that it is a threat to that. The purpose of taking any military action, a limited, focused, tailored strike of limited duration, time-wise, is something that is in keeping with that. It says you cannot use weapons of mass destruction, in this case chemical weapons, with impunity, whoever you may be, in this case, clearly at the doorstep of President Assad. I reminded members this morning, though, of that earlier in the 90s when President Clinton asked Congress for authorization on going into the Balkans. Mr. Hoyer works very hard on this subject because he's always been a champion for promoting our values internationally. That when we took the vote, it was 213 to 213, while our planes were in the air while the bombing was taking place. It failed for lack of a majority. But the president continued the action that he had the authority to do. Congress did not give him further authority. It is not necessary for Congress to give the president this authority. We are grateful that he has asked for it. But if he sees an opportunity, we don't want the Russians to think that his leverage is diminished because of a vote we may or may not succeed with in the Congress. I'm more optimistic than some on that subject. But the fact is that the Russians bringing to the table a proposal that has been discussed by the president and others over time, but now has muscle because of the prospect of a threat, is something that I think the president deserves a great deal of credit for. I hope that it works. What we were told this morning, and the administration will speak for itself publicly, but our members were assured by by the President's Chief of Staff that this, if it is serious, if it is credible, if it is real, will be given every consideration. And that's good news, I think. So hopefully it is real and that it is serious, because it does answer the challenge that we have, is how do you stop the Assad government from using weapons of mass destruction again? And how do we act upon the use that they already have executed? So we're at a place where it's about our values. Of course, we are concerned about the loss of life, but it's about our national security. And my role, as I said to the members, my heart beats to the tune of member impact, member impact, member impact. The members have to make the vote that they think is the right vote. But I just don't want anybody to think that in case they don't think that this is the right vote for them, that there's any weakening of the resolve in Congress for the president to have all the leverage in the world to negotiate about taking those weapons of mass destruction, those chemical weapons, out of the hands of Assad and under international control. Again, I don't think there is support for the proposal the president made in his words, but something closer to what the Senate did, absent the McCain language, tailored, what the president has talked about in honoring that, but not in exactly the same words that he sent over. So that's, I think, the state of play for where we are. Mr. Clyburn has been involved in many meetings, and he was with us all morning, can't be with us right now, but perhaps he'll join us. But I'm very pleased that number 2 in the leadership for the House Democrats, Mr. Hoyer, is with us and has been present in all of these debates for a very long time. Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Leader. I join the leader in supporting the President's posture. I believe that the President's right to suggest the use of military force in order to prevent, constrain, prohibit the use of chemical weapons, which for over 100 years has been perceived by the international community at large as unacceptable to be used in any form of warfare. I am for giving the President the authority, and will vote to do so on an appropriate resolution. Mr. McDonough's briefing today I thought was excellent, as both the classified briefings and the unclassified briefings. There is no doubt in my mind that the Assad regime did in fact decide to use chemical weapons, has used chemical weapons on a regular basis, a more limited basis than were used on August 21st, but nevertheless has used chemical weapons before as one of the tools in their toolbox of weapons to use to murder their own people. As a result, I think the President's suggested actions are correct. It is also, once the Congress is seized of an issue, understandable, and the legislative process, that we consider the form of that resolution, which is now in process. I think that there has been a recent response to what has been a long-standing request of the administration. For over 2 years, the administration has been suggesting international control of the chemical weapons held by the Assad regime. The Russians have not been responsive, nor has the Assad regime been responsive to that. As a direct result, in my opinion, of the President's statement that military force can and will be used, we have seen a response just recently from Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, and the administration has said that they are going to test that offer. They're not going to have the opportunity to delay action, to dissemble, to rope-a-dope, if you will, without having an effect of actually constraining and controlling those chemical weapons. The administration's purpose is to stop their use and proliferation. I think they are absolutely correct in that effort. Hopefully, we will be able to pursue this in the very near term, and when I say very near term, days, not weeks. I think the administration is correct in asserting that that's its intention. So I look forward to the administration's response and initiatives. I look forward to the President's speech tonight, and I am hopeful that we will act in a responsible, effective way that will maintain the position of the United States as a credible international participant in meeting crisis and stabilizing, like no other country in the world can do, international tensions. Lastly, let me say that there are two other issues that confront the Congress of the United States that I'm hopeful we will responsibly act upon, and that is the funding of government at levels necessary to meet the obligations of our country, to grow our economy, and to invest in our future. And thirdly, it is absolutely incumbent upon the Congress of the United States, Ronald Reagan said this when he was president, every president has said that since, to ensure that America remains faithful to its debtors, to its creditors, and pays its debts. It is absolutely essential that we increase the debt limit for that which we have already done, for that which we have already incurred obligations for. The most creditworthy nation on earth must do that. Every Republican leader, every Democratic leader has said that's what we ought to do, and we ought not to hold hostage the creditworthiness of the United States. So those three issues, hopefully we will deal with responsibly and effectively and maintain America's credibility around the world and with our own people. And I now yield to the Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Welcome back. Join with my chair in welcoming all of you back as well. Maybe you should welcome us all back.
Have you voted?
Have I voted? I did vote yesterday. I hope to maybe vote again today if that's permissible. In Queens County, it might be. But in all sincerity, I think it is good to be back. I think the American people need Congress back here working. And although we are heading into the fall months, we hope this is an opportunity for us to spring forward and spring anew with the energy that we need to have to solve our nation's problems. I'm very pleased that the administration has continued a dialogue with our caucus and with the Congress on all the issues that we're going to be confronting and continue to confront here in Congress, from ensuring that our government continues to operate, to seeing through that we meet our debts and responsibilities as a nation, to see that we tackle the issue of comprehensive immigration reform, and that we see through the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. And in all sincerity, given the issue of chemical warfare that has arisen since August 21st of last month, to have that dialogue, that open dialogue, that deep discussion that our caucus is having on this very critical and enormous issue, not only for we here in the United States, but for all the people throughout the world. I thank the administration for that dialogue. I hope that our colleagues in the Republican caucus are having as deep, deliberative, and discussion with clarity that the Democratic caucus, and I salute our chairman for those opportunities, for those discussions that we're having. I find them fruitful. I think our caucus members do as well. And once again, welcome back.
We'll take a few questions.
You mentioned the proposal from the Russians.
Yes.
Senator Reid held back on moving forward on the resolution in the Senate.
Yeah.
And Senator McCain and Schumer are working on an amendment to add language that would give that proposal a time limit and a test. Do you support adding that kind of language to the resolution? And do you think that this proposal from the Russians has essentially taken the air out of the administration to get support for a military strike?
Well, I think what the initiative from the Russians has done is said to has given the president a victory because it has it has recognized that for 2.5 years the president has used and attempted diplomacy to try to have a political solution to what is happening in Syria. That the Secretary of State, and now this Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry, have talked about going to Geneva. They've had the Geneva I, Geneva II, about how to have a transition to a post-Assad Syria in a political and peaceful way. So what the Russians are suggesting, if it is real and if it is serious, says that the dynamic has changed. The president has been trying for this. He's been striving to get the Syrian weapons under international control, and now the Russians are suggesting it. So I think this is a victory for President Obama, if it is real. We'll hear more from the administration about that evaluation. I'm sure the president is speaking to his counterparts throughout the world on that subject. But coming back to it doesn't take the wind out, it validates what the president is doing. The Russian proposal validates what the president is doing. The members, it's interesting, even before the Russian proposal, Chris Van Hollen, in the initiative that he has put forth about limitation of time, of focus, and the rest, had over the weekend worked on something that said if he is advising that the change in dynamic could take place if the weapons were placed under international control. This is before the Russians spoke up, but not before the Americans had spoken up. So we already are talking about predicating something to go forward with, predicating something on the fact that this may be possible if it works. Well, let me say it another way. If it doesn't work, then the language would be about a very limited, in terms of scope and duration, targeted, tailored, as the president described, but with more clarity than what his original initiative put forth. But I think that this is called progress. We'll call progress. We'll find out. We'll find out if the Russians are serious about this, and that would be good.
Frank could be a trap. Frank, go ahead.
Do you trust the Russians to implement this proposal, or do you feel that other countries or the UN needs to be part of implementing, taking control of these chemical weapons from Syria?
I think that we have said to our members that we will exhaust every remedy before using force. Everything that we are about, whether it's our military, they're trained for use of force as a last resort. So if there is a reasonable, serious prospect that this could work, I think we should give it a chance, give this a chance, and then we'll see how serious the Russians are about it. Because in our caucus, there is really a strong interest among members to take this to the UN. We've tried to point out the futility of it because the Russians are never going to vote with us, so we think. But the members are saying, well, then let the world see that they don't want to. And so is that a good use of time? That's a debate that we are having. But there is a strong belief in our caucus that we should try everything first. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's always, is what I don't know if she's spoken publicly about her position, but one could probably predict that she would not be supporting the language that the president sent over, but is asking for an alternative that is about diplomatic initiatives. So I don't think we can ignore any diplomatic initiatives, and this is a diplomatic initiative. So we'll find out if it's real. You're asking, could it be a trap? Well, Steny said we can't have rope-a-dope. If this is just to prolong for reasons other than achieving the purpose of not having impunity for a government that uses weapons of mass destruction, we'll soon find out. So this can't be endless. But I don't think it can be ignored either.
Madam Leader, we'll take one last question. I saw Ginger with her hand up. So what? Excuse me.
Excuse me, sir. I gave him the impression when I went there that there would be there, so maybe two. Okay.
Britain's Foreign Secretary has warned today against getting drawn into an endless process. How much time do you think you give the Russians and Syrians to prove that they're serious in this?
Well, that'll really be up to the President of the United States and the State Department and the Defense Department and the rest. I think that they can demonstrate their seriousness very clearly, and the Syrian government can make a response fairly soon about it, because this isn't new. Since 2003, the Congress of the United States voted and President Bush signed the Syria Accountability Act. So this is not a new subject that requires a great deal of study on their part. And so we would hope that it would be soon. And by the way, I just want to be clear, I do think that if the military sees, if it isn't real, and the military sees an opportunity that is ideal, the least collateral damage, the most focused on accomplishing what it needs to accomplish on the chemical weapons, that I would recommend to the president that he did what President Clinton did, is go forward. We'll have time to discuss all the rest of it, but go forward, even because I don't believe that he needs the authorization.
Madam Leader, Ginger raised her hand, so I want to recognize someone who raised their hand.
Ginger, thank you for raising your hand.
So I'm short back here. Leaving the meeting, there were some concerns and some members that there was an overwhelming
And this will be the last question.
opposition coming from Democrats, and then allowing this to go to the floor would have the president repudiated, putting him in a weak position going forward with the fiscal negotiations that are going to happen. Does this Russia proposal save him from that possibility? And how is he positioned, in your opinion, going forward on the CR, on the debt ceiling, now that this has become a bit of a protracted fight in Congress?
I'm pleased to answer the question, but I want, if my colleagues have something they want to say on the subject.
Well, I would just comment and maybe go back to the first question. I think as many of us are deliberating what position we'll take, we look forward to the president's delivery of his speech tonight. I think we will all be listening intently on every word that he uses. But I think you can also make the argument that his hand is strengthened in coming to Congress and asking for having the ability to have all the tools in his shed available for the purposes of bringing about a diplomatic solution. As one of our colleagues, and it may have been the leader herself who said, make no mistake, the reason why this proposal by the Russians is being proffered and the Syrians apparently accepting is because of their fear of what steps the free world would take to secure these chemical weapons.
Please.
The only word I'll say is this. It is not coincidental that Russia put forward this proposal.
Let me just respond by complimenting once again my colleagues under the leadership of Mr. Becerra and Mr. Crowley, the leadership of the House Democratic Caucus. I'm more optimistic than others about where Democrats may come down on this, but there are a couple things that we have to see. Tonight, we want to see the president, and I have every confidence that he will project the values of America, his responsibility to protect and defend our country, which we all take an oath to do, and put this in perspective. I believe the American people want to see as much evidence as he can give in terms of the intelligence on that this happened and that the Assad regime is responsible for it, that every diplomatic remedy has been exhausted, and now we have a new one. And so that is worthy of respect and attention, I believe, until we have reason not to believe it. But let's be hopeful and positive about it, that it will be indeed, as he has said, focused and tailored and of limited duration, and that its purpose is single, and that is to deter the use of weapons of mass destruction, in this case, chemical weapons, which is a pillar of our national security, and that there are no boots on the ground and that there is no escalation beyond what the president's purpose is in doing this. I feel very confident from the briefings that we have had jointly, separately, electronically, classified way, in every way, that the president is prepared to make that case. We'll see how the American people respond. On the other hand, the American people are weary of war, and we all are. We consider use of force a last resort, and this would be if we went forward, and that there were some misrepresentations about the Iraq War that weren't true. The American people feel burned, and yet that shouldn't be a deterrent to doing, on the basis of the real intelligence this time, what is necessary to do. I remind you that at the time of the Iraq War, as a senior intelligence person for the Democrats, I saw all of the intelligence, and I said to some of you who were here then, the intelligence does not support the threat. This intelligence supports the threat. So I think that the president, acting from strength, I said this is a tough hombre. He is going out there doing what he believes is right for our country as president and as commander-in-chief. So I believe that it will all work out. I hope it will be so around the Russian initiative. But I do think that the courtesy, more than the courtesy, the respect that the president afforded to Congress by saying, act upon this, is something that will hold him in good stead as we go forward on the domestic agenda, which is so important to us. But I want to thank our caucus, because really they have come forward. Even some who were reluctant to be supportive of what the president said held their powder until the president will speak tonight, until they availed themselves of classified briefings, which some of them couldn't just for geographic reasons, until they heard each other's views on the subject. So I do think, and how many of them came forward, you might have suspected would be an automatic no, with proposals that were more, shall we say, streamlined, including Congressman Van Hollen and Connolly with their proposal, Steve Israel with his proposal, John Larson with his, Elliot Engel emphasizing the Syria accountability. I mean, it's really been impressive to see how deliberative, how thoughtful, how really even prayerful the members have been in the proposals that they have put forth. Let us pray that the Russian proposal is one that will avoid the use of force.
So following the leaders, we're gonna close. If you wish to ask more questions, we can. But we're gonna close, and following the leaders' lead, and in the spirit of the Hispanic Heritage Month, and the leaders' lead in being bilingual in her presentation here. With, what did you say? Oh, tough hombre. Yeah.
That was sort of very hybrid.
We will say no más. We're done. Muchas gracias. You can ask questions now individually.
Thank you.